Welcome. This is the post-secondary transition conversation. We focus on the ins and outs and everything in between of the transition process for families of students with disabilities. I am one of the hosts. My name is Patrick Cadigan. I am a public school transition coordinator. As always, I have a co-host, and who would that be?
I am Meghan Smallwood, and I am also a public school transition coordinator.
So for today's conversation, we had a chance to sit down with Liz Burley, a transition coordinator with 40 years of experience. Now, she worked in neighboring Prince George's County, but Liz's resume is too long to recite. But she worked as a transition coordinator. She was a member of the Council of Exceptional Children, actively participates in the ARC of PG County, including 101-style discussions about transition, which consequently is how we found her. Without further ado...
All right. So today we are fortunate enough to have Liz Burley with us. Thank you for joining us, Liz.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And Liz has a lot of background with transition, specifically with Prince George's County. So I guess we'll just dive right into it. If you don't mind just telling us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm a native New Yorker, and I came down here to go to the University of Maryland. So I'm a Terp forever. Started out actually in pre-med before I decided that, okay, me and organic chemistry did not get along.
Oh, wow. What a switch.
I decided to go into the passion that I've always had, which was special education. I come from a family of educators. I had worked in my church organization, too, where we had a Sunday school for special needs. So that had always been a passion of mine. So I got my degree in special ed, had done student teaching here in Prince George's County, in both elementary and in special ed. And of course, special ed was where my heart was. I started teaching at a special education center, which was the old Princess Garden Special Center, where students came. My classroom actually was students that came out of the state institution at Great Oak Center. And I always had the secondary students, so I always loved my older kids. So I got so involved with the kids and doing some simple things that the attention that they did not get at the institution. So on Fridays, we installed like our grooming day, where we did nail polishing and shampooing hair and curling hair and doing all sorts of nice grooming things. And then we had a dance in the afternoon, and everybody kind of loved it. You know, the boys were involved, the girls were involved. I had boys blow drying girls' hair, all sorts of things that the kids just relished. It became so impassioned that I used to go out and visit at Great Oak Center. So I knew my way around that quite a bit. Even involved my son, who was very small at the time, I'd say probably 3 years old. So he'd start racing wheelchairs around the cottages that they had out there. So he became very involved as well. I stayed at Princess Garden. We moved into the Margaret Brent building. So my special center career was about 5 years. I then went over to a high school where I worked with diploma-bound students, and they were in self-contained classes at the time and did academics. So it was a big change for me during that career time, but I saw the potential in so many of these young people, and I actually have contact with a lot of those same students today. I have several on speed dial. Someone has a tow truck company. I knew who my people are to go to, so they've become very close to me. The bond was right there from the beginning because kids know which teachers kind of care about them.
Absolutely.
And they can pick up that sense with them. So I had kids that had never academically done anything, young men that couldn't read. And then by the time he graduated, he actually had made honor roll for the first time. And his mother was just so thrilled and delighted. And he was. And even though he learned how to accommodate himself, with the use of technology and texting and things where, the predictors of words would come up, that was a big thing. So I stayed in the high school years for about half of my career, and then I went into central office. So I became a resource teacher for other teachers. So I'd go into other buildings and help other schools set up certain things and certain programs. In 2007, we implemented a transition coordinator, a specialist position, which was a 12-month administrative position, which I held. And just because we were fighting a little bit more to get more transition services to our students and putting the emphasis on transition, the state had put in place. Early on in my career, I actually became also a foster parent for some young adults that had been at Great Oaks Center. So they were at one of the centers and graduated in both 88 and 89. And at the time with the state going into any of the adult service programs, there was a 7-year waiting list for anybody to get into some of the adult programs. So the waiting list was very high and the budget was not there to fund a lot of these programs. As being a foster parent, I could see the different challenges with the adult services as well as families, and I saw how desperate families were to get their young people into these adult programs. Thankfully, with a lot of advocacy, I think, from parents, because parents are the key to everything. They put in place the Governor's Transitioning Youth Initiative, and that guaranteed that the students leaving school had guaranteed spots that first year they left school. So if they accessed services during that first year of leaving school that needed day programs from the long-term services, they could access that within that first year. And that became really critical to many families. So that's why transition became so important for families to understand if they needed a program for the young person that needed services during that time, that they needed to make sure that their applications were in and they followed through during that first year. Otherwise, they got put back at the bottom of the waiting list, which could be several years long. And that became, my mantra to making sure parents understood that this was a long-term process. Because many of our students have a lot of skills, because if they're not that strong academically, doesn't mean that they're not great employees and that they don't have great work skills, or that they're not college material, because some of our students were very much so college material. They just had to find their niche. So being able to get a student to figure out what they love to do and trying to make that a career, and understanding, do I like working with my hands? Do I want to do something sitting down? Can I sit down in an office job? And if ADHD, a sitting on a job may not be the best thing for me. Understanding that and trying to get the parents to understand that. Even my mother sometimes used to say, well, what about a good government job? And I have a son that went into the Air Force, and he's not one that likes to sit in an office. So those good government jobs where you're sitting in an office is not something that he would particularly like. So it's about getting students and families to understand everybody has to find their niche. What is going to be meaningful to them? Those are the biggest keys, I think, for any student going to school. And it's okay if you change your mind. Something you want to do, but then go back and say, okay, what is it that I really like to do? Figuring out a job and knowing that you don't like it is just as important as finding one that you do like. Okay, because if you do some trial and different job shadowing or following somebody else or talking to somebody else about their job, when you eliminate jobs that you know you don't want to do, is just as important as finding out the right one for you. Those are keys, and I used to tell my students all the time, it didn't matter whether you worked with the trash trucks, because those guys make really good money. So if you could handle the smell and the heavy lifting and being out in all kinds of weather, great. And then work your way up and start owning the business, doing those types of things. So that's where trying to get the kids to understand their passion and understanding what they're really good at doing. So those were some of the things that I have done over the years with my students. We used to do a career expo each year, and would bring all the schools together, and would usually did it at the community college. And kids would go to different seminars, almost like do things about self-advocacy. They do Dress for Success. What do I wear for that interview? We had our speech pathologist come in and actually do mock interviews with the students that was so eye-opening, both the speech pathologists as well as for the students. And the students walked away with an evaluation of their interview and what they needed to work on. So those things, we had guest speakers come in, and each school kind of nominated their outstanding student for an award. And those became really important for our students. They looked forward to it. We made the kids dress up, like you're going for an interview. So, here's your chance to be up on the community college campus and see how things are, interact with different people. A lot of companies were there to hire, colleges were there. So, different places were there for our diploma bound students as well. Our transitioning youth fairs for our certificate students became one. We had more and more agencies participating. They put together a provider council so that all the adult agencies worked together in all aspects of what they were looking for. We even got put into place a unified application for the adult agencies so that every agency didn't have a different application that parents had to fill out, which was great because you filled out one application for several participating agencies and they could just Xerox it, and then use it for any of the agencies that were there instead of trying to complete all these different applications. And those are the things that I think are really key in getting parents to understand how important it is and their role in all of this. For our transitioning youth going into the adult agencies, those are lifelong programs that the students can get into. Once they apply for the Developmental Disability Administration with DDA, that's a lifelong thing. They don't have to keep reapplying. So those are the key things because I always want our parents to push our young people to be as independent as possible. No matter what it is, whether you're doing hand over hand where you're lifting the cup over to the sink, or each kid is pulling the trash from each room in your house and doing some of those things to contribute, whatever a young person can do, they need to do to be a part of that because they want to feel important and they want to feel a part of the family unit as well. And that helps them to do that. If we do everything for our young people, they'll never be independent. Even for our non-disabled children, I know colleges used to call the parents the helicopter parents age. This is the generation of helicopter parents because the parents are calling the colleges and want to talk to the professors and, give the kids excuses of why they weren't there or, they had a paper, they need extra time. Getting to know the differences between what you're entitled to during those school years in your school age years for public school as compared to what you have to become eligible for when you go to college. You're not going to be accepted at every college you apply to because everybody has their own criteria. And that's the same also with adult agencies. Every agency has their criteria of clients that they're looking for and the services that they provide. And every agency may provide different services. So it's about them understanding and looking and searching for the right agency that's going to match their young adults' needs and their needs. Do they provide transportation? Will they need to use Metro Access? How will they get there? So those are some of the important things that all parents really need to focus on.
I think it goes back to that advocacy piece too. I know it's so hard. I think we see with parents, they always have somebody in the school system to lean on and to help them through. And then at 21, for those who are going out into adult agencies, it's like a cliff, just falling off the cliff.
It is. And that's why sometimes we really have to, wean our parents from doing everything for them and trying to make sure that they're really pushing it. I mean, in school, we could sit there and complete applications, but does a guidance counselor complete college applications for students?
Right.
No. It's a student and a parent responsibility to know what colleges they want to apply to, what financial aid they would need to do, filling out a financial aid application. So I try to make sure parents understand that this is the same comparison. Because you had an IEP doesn't mean that we are doing everything for you. It's still your responsibility to see that some of these things get done. We can guide you and lead you along the way, but parents have to understand that the power that they have. None of these programs would be put in place without the parents. It's parents that push to get students into public schools, have disabilities. Parents got the laws changed.
And I remember I had one parent tell me once that he's going to be the constant in his son's life. So he has to know everything that's going on and he has to know who the coordinator is for this agency and who the person is for that. And it can be frustrating when, you feel like it's working in silos, but unfortunately that they have to know it all.
Absolutely. And it's hard and it's a different role. And, parents feel, they're trying to push their other kids out of the house to be as independent that they're not gonna have to shadow them, but some of 'em some of them come back home too without IEPs.
Yep.
Sometimes we have to still guide them as well.
Yep.
But yes, you are the constant. You're the most important part of your child's life. They do need you as the advocate to continue on with all of that fighting that you're going to need to do. That's why I tell parents, keep a notebook of all the people you talk to. Anytime you call an agency or you're talking to somebody, get a name, a log. I talked to SSI this day. I talked to DDA this day. Who did I speak to? Who was the person? So you can refer back to that person. Well, Mrs. Jones told me this. Now, Mrs. Smith, you're telling me this? Which is it? Somebody correct me here. So why am I getting two different answers from the same agency? So it's about knowing that and being able to get to do that. And it becomes a second job.
Yeah, that's the worst. I think that's the worst fear or the overwhelming fear. It's I already have a job. Now I've got to worry about all this.
It's also important for parents then to surround themselves with support groups,
Yes.
because parents learn the most from other parents. What worked for you? What didn't work for you? It's sad because, I lived through the time and taught through the time where parents were desperate for help, where they needed their young adult to leave the house, and they needed to get them into some residential services because the waiting list was so long they couldn't. So what they did is they got respite care and then refused to pick up the young adult from respite care. And it was heartbreaking at both sides. But the parents were that desperate that they decided that that was going to be their best move, because then the young adult was in crisis and they had to place him. So I don't want to see families have to go through that. I want them to be able to follow through, to see what they want for their child. Is everything going to work out perfectly? No, it's not. Are you going to have to make some changes sometimes? Yeah, you will. Okay, whether it's changing an agency, changing a residential care program, whatever it is, you're going to have to make some changes sometimes. Just like we make changes in our lives. We may change jobs or change locations or move our homes. We all make changes, and sometimes you have to do that for our young adults. But getting parents to understand that, okay, when you retire, you may not move to Florida and still get the same services. These services are here for the state of Maryland. So if you go down to Rehoboth Beach and you want to live there, fine, but you've had to have an apartment on Maryland side so that you have a residency in Maryland for your young adult to get their services. It's important to understand those ins and outs of a lot of that legality, where those services are. Here, I know we're very lucky because we do have a lot of services here. Counties may not have as many, no matter how active you are. But I always say, get with a support group. The ARC of Maryland is wonderful. Each county has ARC. More so, they're a very large advocacy group that fight for our young adults and people with disabilities. They
Right.
have, legislation. So those are some key points that the parents really do need to become active and understand all of those ins and outs of the legal system as well.
I think social media has really helped with that too, that they're able to find the other parents out there to connect with. And I know some providers have even popped up in that way because of parents have gotten together and said, we want something different. And they
Absolutely.
worked to create it.
We belong to a couple of different Facebook groups where the parents are advocating for each other, talking through challenges that they're having. And that has there's no shortage of discussion and need for a sharing of information.
And that's even when your child is younger. It's on the IEP and understanding the IEP, because, it's long and drawn out. That's why we used to hate printing them out, right? 40 pages or so of all this stuff. But knowing what the key points are, what are the most important parts? Where do you want to see your child?
Mhm.
What's most important? Scary part is too is the parents understanding what the needs are. What an agency is looking for in that transition piece. I was in a meeting with a family, and the mother was so worried about toilet training. My child needs to be toilet trained. They won't get into an adult program if they're not toilet trained. I said, well, who told you that? That is not a criteria for many adult programs. I said, we have many people that are not toilet trained. Well, they have to be able to write their name. No, they don't have to be able to write their name. We have many very involved children that do not have use of their hands and
Mhm.
mobility to do that, but that doesn't mean that they can't get into a program. So it's about knowing where your child is. Yes, is toilet training important? It is if it can be achieved. It may not be able to be achieved by everybody. So knowing what are the supports that you're going to use for that.
And what kind of steps can you take to get to the most independent level that they can achieve for training? So if they can stand for a change instead of lay down, that's perfect. But yeah.
Or they can signal you some way to know that they need to be changed. So whatever it is, how are they communicating? And I think it's also very, very important for parents to be able to share the knowledge of their young adult with other people. How is somebody else going to know my child? We as parents sometimes think we are the end all and be all to our kids. There's nobody that's going to be a better parent than we are. And it's nice to think that. And we all want to pat ourselves on the back saying, yeah, I did a hell of a job raising my kids, or,
Mhm.
I'm the only one that can take care of his needs. But we have to understand that we're not always going to be there.
Right.
And what happens when we're not there? How do we make our young adult be as independent as possible if we're not there? Who's going to take over my role? Because if we think we're the end all and be all to everything for our kid, then we're being pretty selfish for ourselves because then we're not giving our kid an expansive support system, and that is what is crucial is about, it's not knowing everything. It's about knowing where to go to look for the information.
We recently had a discussion with another former transition coordinator, Betsy, and one of the things that she impressed upon me as I was listening to her talking was that the discussion of transition is it is a process. And so because it is a process, like timelines can look very different. And
Hmm.
you have to take in the needs of the student, of the child, of the parent, what the agencies are doing and looking for, and things like that. But it is a process. So as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking about that's just reinforcing that idea that in that process, changes will need to be made, and you're going to have to be able to adapt, and that in and of itself, that adaptation can be a big deal.
And transition is changing all the time, all the time. Regulations are changing all the time. We used to have a lot of the day programs where the kids did piecework. The kids aren't doing piecework anymore. What are they doing now? They're going out in the community. What can they do? What are their likes? What do they like to do? Everything is changing all the time. So we have to be ready for that change. And it takes time. It's not easy. It's not easy for parents when their kids go off to college. And I've had parents even, in our programs, some parents are thinking that graduation is the most exciting day of their lives. And then others say it's the saddest day because they're leaving that world that they know that supports their child. And they know a lot of them know many of the teachers and staff for years and years because they've been with them all these years. So now they're going out into the world of the unknown, and that's scary for the adults as well.
Over the course of your career, what do you think of is the biggest change in transition? Like the biggest, like positive change in transition?
Many, many more students are working is one of the biggest changes I've seen from our students, that graduated with certificates. They're non-diploma students, but you see more and more of them working. They're courtesy clerks. They're working in different places. The community is opening the doors to more people with disabilities. So the awareness, I think, has grown so much over the years that it's much more acceptable. People aren't as stigmatized as they used to be. You're still going to find some that are. The doors have opened more. You see more people with disabilities on television and in movies, so they know what the capabilities are. I think those are some of the biggest changes that I've seen. Years ago, it was you had a child with a significant disability and the doctor said, put him in an institution. and now we don't have those institutions anymore. So that's another big change because at the time people don't know, and even doctors don't know at all. Even as many of them that I worked with over the years that have come to graduate. I said, many of you sit here at graduation, and a lot of you, the doctors have told you your child wouldn't live past the age of 5. And here they are now, 21, graduating their program. I said, so everybody doesn't know all the answers all the time. So you have to go with that, and you just have to keep pushing forward.
So along those lines, then, where do you see change still needing to happen? Like, what would you like to see moving forward?
I know there's much more integration going on as far as the programs being put in public schools here. I know in Prince George's County, what we used to call our old special education centers being eliminated, and they're putting the classes in the new buildings that are being built and integrating them into the regular high school, middle schools, and elementary schools so that everybody is aware. I think when kids grow up with kids with disabilities in their classrooms, they learn. Okay, it's just as much of a learning process for our general ed kids as it is for our special needs kids. Those general ed kids grow up to become our providers, our teachers, and sometimes even parents. So it's about them knowing and them as a young age building that compassion. And when you're exposed to it at a young age, like everything else, it becomes natural as you get older that you're more open to hiring somebody with a disability. You're more open to working with somebody with a disability. So you become much more compassionate of anybody working with somebody with a disability. So those things I think are critical that we see more and more of.
I know you had mentioned before about the trial and error, learning what their strengths are, what they like to do, what they didn't like to do. Is there a work program where the students actually go out in the community during the day in Prince George's County?
Yes. And I know COVID has thrown a lot of those things
Yeah.
around, but yeah, in the high school programs that we try to get them out 4 days a week into different, vocational type programs where they're experiencing different things and working in different positions, whether it be in retail and, hanging clothes at Marshall's or sorting clothes. But those are some types of things that they do, whether it's with food service in any of the cafeterias, whether it's cleaning in different areas around. Some of those jobs that they can do. Some of them get jobs that come into the building where they're doing some assembly type work. So those are some things. And working on those behavioral skills, are really critical that make our kids socially acceptable out in the community. Learning how to shake hands. And some of my parents that have heard me talk for a while always say one of my favorite lines is, what's cute at 5 is not cute at 15. It's cute when the little 5-year-old comes running up and hugging you.
Mm-hmm.
When that now 5-year-old is now 6'5", and they come running up trying to hug you, it scares people to death. Be because now this is a grown person, this is an adult, so you have to understand the differences in what is socially acceptable. So getting the kids to practice that handshaking and the greetings that they can, or fist bumps or whatever it is that make it acceptable with their peers. And it's gonna be new for everybody. I know at the high school, when we first had our certificate students come into the high school, there was some issues where the kids went running out to their buses and different gates and everything, and there was a group of kids in the cafeteria that started laughing. One kid got up on the table and yelled at everybody, said, "Who the heck do you think you are yelling at them? That could be your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, your niece, or your nephew. Don't be laughing at them." After that, you could have heard a pin drop, they said, in the cafeteria. And the kids then started accepting them into the cafeteria at lunchtime and sitting at the tables with them and getting to know them. So it was an opening by one person that got the rest of the kids accepted. So it only takes one out of a large group that makes it unacceptable, the bad behavior, and gets the acceptable behavior to be customized to everybody. it became an integration thing in the cafeteria then where the kids went in to eat their lunch with everybody else. They didn't have to sit in a separate corner, or a separate table. They were eating with their classmates, with everybody else. It only takes that one. And so that one has to be somebody even in the family.
I think it's interesting because even in discussions with my teacher friends, sometimes when we're having those discussions, we talk about that it's easier for the kids to accept students with disabilities into the classroom than even some of the adults, which I think is pretty amazing.
Well, the younger kids have a much more open mind at the time. I think we as adults get set in our ways. It's like the teacher that wants to do the same lesson over and over again. They have to do it the same way each time they do it. It's the same worksheets. It's the same discussions. So it's about breaking out, even with our own habits. As we get in, we get set in our ways. So older people are set in their ways, and they're kind of like, and they still have some of the old stigmatisms. Are they contagious? What's going to happen? Are they going to hurt somebody? So it's the fear of the unknown, because you have given yourself a chance to know them. I think our young adults, our gen ed young adults, learn as much from the student with a disability as the kid with a disability can learn from the gen ed student, because that gen ed student is learning some compassion. They're learning how to help somebody else. They're learning how to defend somebody in a positive way and speaking up, and they're learning to advocate for this other young adult. So I think that is just as important of a lesson as anything you could teach.
As we're having the conversation, of course, we're talking about certificate track students who will not graduate with a high school diploma, and then we have our diploma students. Did you have a preference in terms of the students that you worked with? Like, one of the things that Meghan and I have discussed is that obviously a lot of the information that we push out there is for our non-diploma bound students, because there's lots and lots of information out there for the diploma bound students as well. So did you have a preference in terms of who you like to work with?
I didn't. I used to go back and forth between the two so much, because I had my non-diploma students also here in my house. So dealing with that 24/7, as well as my other son, my son that went into the Air Force. I said, so, I was dealing with both ends, even within my own home. I guess it's sometimes those kids that are in the middle of the road. It's the kids that are not quite a certificate-based students, but are in that.
We call them tweeners.
Tweeners.
Those are the kids sometimes that get really stuck. They're too high to get long-term services, yet they're not as independent as they need to be out there on their own full-time. So it's about getting them to know where the resources are for them and following through. So if they get involved with the Division of Rehab Services and they get some job training and they get some support to do what they want to do, I think that becomes critical. Knowing that they could go to Workforce Technology Center in Baltimore and get automotive training or get office computer skills training. Any of those things would be critical to know what they want to do. Knowing that they could get their driver's license, and that they have driving programs for them. Those are some things that are critical. So getting them to understand the different programs that are out there and available is really important for that group of young people, because they become very, very successful. A lot of them then wind up starting their own business, or they have family members that help them start their own business, or they take over and work in their family businesses. So all those things become very critical for them.
Again, it's helping them find their niche and what they want to do. And also, I think the parents continuing that advocacy piece.
Absolutely. And sometimes those are also the kids where the parents kind of pull back a little bit more. They really become on their own. I've had students that have, when we did some job training, they got placed in a work study program with the government. And some of them kept those jobs for 30 years. They were able to work in some of the entry-level positions within the government and then work their way up to higher levels. It's about knowing what the niche is, where the opportunities are for them.
Yeah. And that's one thing. Another parent that we interviewed, Pam Paris, she shared, when she took her son to the job fair for the schools, and she said, "Look, he will be your best employee. He will show up every day. He is here for 30 years, and he will do what he's told you wants to teach him. So you'd be silly not to hire him."
And that's with a lot of them. I mean, I see the courtesy clerk at my Safeway store has been there for years and years.
Mhm.
So they're there, they love their job, they're great with the people, the customers love them. You never see them not happy. They're happy with everything that they're doing. We as non-disabled people have to really sometimes sink into ourselves, why am I in such a grouchy mood? All right. And then you could be going into the store and then this kid brightens up your day by just saying, "Hey, how are you?
Mhm.
Oh, glad to see you." Because they're always happy. They're always happy with the job that they're doing. They know there's never anything that they don't like to do. So those are some key points, for our young people and for people in general. It doesn't matter the job you're doing if you like doing it. One of my other young men was a diploma-bound student, almost did not graduate. Every year for some of the summer youth employment program, wanted to work as a custodian in the school buildings. So he had an opportunity every year to work in a school building through the summer youth employment program. When he got out of school, he got a part-time night job as a school custodian. Okay. After 25 years, the young man now is the supervisor of one of the largest high schools in the county and is training other people, so as a family, has bought a home, has, contributed to society and has raised his family here. If you love what you're doing, he took over a high school building that I'd never seen, that was one of our older buildings. And after he was done with it after the first year, I couldn't get over the difference in the building. The principal was just amazed, the difference in the building, because he took such pride in his work. But the other thing he learned is that I learned from other people is the way he treated his staff. He learned how to treat his staff with respect, and got everybody working as a team player. So, it also turned out how wonderful his character was, and that he learned through the years how he wanted to be treated, and that's how he treated his support staff. He's one of my big success stories that I always talk about, and he's done wonderful.
Mm.
So you take pride in those stories of the kids
Yeah.
you've worked with, keep coming back to become part of your family. So.
Yeah. I think sometimes we face the struggle where there's a disconnect too between what the child or the young adult is telling us they're interested in and what the family's expectations are for them.
Absolutely.
And that's hard as the school, staff to try and be that middleman to make them see, well, this is really what would make them happy.
Because we have these expectations of where we want our kids to be. And I always try to look at it as the point just that I said, okay, you want him to sit in an office, but he can't sit still. Is that going to be a good match for them?
Right.
Sometimes we're afraid sometimes to have those honest conversations with parents to say, well, have you really looked at this? This really going to be a good match for him? What does he really like to do? I'm not lowering my expectations, because as an educator and a teacher in my building, anytime I changed offices, the first person I got to know was the school secretary and the head custodian.
Yep.
I knew those are the two people that could get me whatever I needed. So those are the important people in your building.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the first people everybody goes to for cleaning up, for other things. And people have to change their mindset that job is beneath them.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people all the time, the school custodian makes more than the teachers do. So think about some of those things as far as what they want to do, just like the trash man. If you like doing it, hey, then you're happy with what you're doing. Another young man that had autism, could not read. He wanted a job like his father and wear a shirt and tie to work every day. He could not read, limited academic areas. The job he got, they wound up getting him. He has one of the highest security clearances now, because he works at NSA and he works in the shredding room. And he's has autism, so he loves the humming of the shredding machine. And he can't read any of the confidential documents, so he's not a security risk. Yet he goes into the gate with his white shirt and tie on every day, like his dad, and he goes in and works in the shredding room.
That's a great story. I like that.
Yeah. So there's a niche for everybody. Other people would go crazy with that humming noise. I can't even stand an air conditioner that it when the window units, it could hear the buzzing of the air conditioner. I couldn't stand that. I'd rather
Mm.
sleep than hear that humming of that noise. Yet this young man, that humming noise was soothing to him. Therefore, he excelled at what he did. I've also dealt with parents that have told me to mind my own business. It doesn't matter what I do with my young adult. If I want them to sit home with me, I'm going to take care of them. I don't need any adult agencies. That's a disservice to your children. Would you allow your non-disabled child to do that? They don't want to be with you all the time. I don't care if they're nonverbal. They want to be with their peers. Okay? So don't think that this is so wonderful. That's not wonderful for the child. And, I also said, what is that young adult going to do if you're not here tomorrow?
I was going to say, what happens when you're gone?
And I've dealt with a lot of those emergency situations. I was the phone call that people made, where somebody calls into special ed or the school board and they say, okay, dealing with my 35-year-old nephew and everybody around him has passed away and he's never had any services. So then you're trying to look at, well, where are we going to find documents to prove he had a disability prior to age 22? Where are we going to get him on a waiting list? Who has any files on this young person? Where do you go to a doctor? Now, I've dealt with families like that where things have happened and they've kept this young adult at home. Well, he's now 35 years old, so he's not that young, but he was wheelchair bound. Somebody had to lift him in and out of the tub and everything else and do these things for him, and it became a hardship. And families like to think that siblings or other family members are going to step in and care for your child, and that's not always the way. We'd like to think somebody's going to step in. We want to think brothers or sisters might take them in, and they may tell you that while you're here, but the minute, you're gone, it's not going to happen. And I've dealt with that in my own life with a girlfriend with MS. She was at home, became very involved, was bedbound, and the parents took care of them, and then both parents died within a year of each other. The minute the parents died, the siblings put her in a nursing home. It happens all the time, and it's our responsibility as a parent, our responsibility to make sure that we have plans for what's going to happen when we're gone. Parents say, well, he may not live that long. He'll pass before I do. Well, there's no guarantee. None of us are promised tomorrow. So what are you going to do in the meantime? How are you going to plan for this young adult? And making sure plans are in place for them. As I said, we think we're the end all be all and our kids want to be with us 24/7, but there's not too many of us want to be with our parents 24/7. Our young adults with disabilities are the same. They have feelings. Because they can't vocalize, it doesn't mean that they don't know what's going on. I always tell parents too, don't be careful what you're saying around your child. Just because they can't speak or you think that they're not understand doesn't mean that they don't understand what's going on behind their eyes. Or you don't know how much they're understanding. They're doing different things. It doesn't mean that they're not understanding the world around them or hearing what you're saying or the tone of your voice. It's important for parents to start putting together a portfolio. What is my child's schedule like? Even if you have somebody come in to do respite care sometime. Because if a parent doesn't take care of themselves as a caregiver, they're not going to be able to take care of their child. And you need to let your child be with somebody else sometime. Even if you start out with somebody coming in while you're home too, getting to know your child. Because there's always going to be an emergency. And there's always going to be something that needs to be done. So if you have a portfolio that has their medical information, their medicine, their routine, when do they eat? What is their daily schedule like? What makes them happy? What do they like to do? How do you know if they're sad? How do you know if they're in pain? Is the cry different? Sometimes as mothers, we can distinguish the cries of our children, and you can say, oh, that's a hungry cry, or that's a wet cry, or that's a pain cry. So it's about understanding and getting other people to understand. It doesn't do anybody any good to hold on to information. And I've always done this as a profession in my profession with training other teachers. It doesn't do me any good to hold on to information I know. That's only helping me. But there's so many other people out there that you have to spread the information around to everybody.
Right.
Everybody needs to be aware. It's not one person's job to do just one thing. So everybody needs to know the difference between the high school, the college, the transition with these agencies, the application process, the timelines. As many people as possible need to know that. Just be a transition coordinator in a school is the only person that holds on to that information. Every teacher dealing with that child should understand that information. But parents, especially as an adult, if they're going in, you can say, this is their routine. This is what they like. And if it's in a portfolio, notebook, whatever you want, somebody else can get to know my child. Because as I've said, none of us are promised tomorrow. Anything could happen.
I think that's a good place to bring this conversation to an end.
You have a lot of good advice, Liz. I really appreciate you sharing all that.
That's because I'm old.
You've seen a lot with transition for sure.
Yeah, over the years, just seen the changes over the years.
Well, we can't thank you enough for taking your time to come out and talk with us, and we really do appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much. You brought up so many important things that I want parents to hear over and over again because I think it'll really needs to resonate with them. That was wonderful.
Liz
is just so chock full of information.
Yeah, it was a good conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully you all did too. So before we let you go, we wanted to share out our Well, That's Helpful segment with a new resource. And this week we're highlighting Disability Rights Maryland, which many of you may have heard of. Disability Rights Maryland, or DRM, is a nonprofit organization which is formally known as Maryland Disability Law Center. The Disability Rights Maryland is federally mandated and it advances the civil rights of people with disabilities. They're providing free legal services to Marylanders of any age with all types of disabilities, including developmental, intellectual, psychiatric, physical, sensory, learning, traumatic brain injury. Anyone who lives in a facility in the community or who are homeless. They assist with an advocacy for a number of areas, and just to name a few, they will help with education, any nursing facilities if you have an issue with that, assistive technology, civil rights and voting rights, Medicaid issues, advocacy for Social Security beneficiaries, which I know many families have accessed them for that support, and public policy. They are a huge advocate for public policy. And I've known some of the things that they've fought for over the last couple of years, and they're just fantastic. Any Maryland resident with a disability and a legal issue within their scope of advocacy service plan, which is further outlined on their website, can contact the intake office to see if they're able to assist them. You can find out more information about the process, along with details about their programs and services at www.disabilityrightsmd.org. And I just want to add that they've been a wonderful resource for our county in particular in the past by providing informational workshops for our families on guardianship and the alternatives to guardianship, which I know many of our families have accessed and really appreciated. They also provide live Q&A sessions on their Facebook page throughout the school year to help parents and families understand the right to education services for children with disabilities. So be sure to look for them there as well. Our discussions are everywhere: Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, and others. So hit the follow button and you won't miss out. Please help us spread the word about our discussions by leaving us a review. Links to the information from our conversations are always in our show notes. Surf to our sister website, www.postsecondarytransition.com, full of information and links to more resources. Our YouTube channel contains curated videos that revolve around transition, including playlists for guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, able accounts, and more to come. Thanks so much for your time spent with us, and we look forward to talking again soon.